I am Vivian Hale, 32 years old, and I had just returned from an important business trip to find the locks on my dream house changed. Exhausted and confused, I drove to my parents' home, where my brother Marcus was showing off photos from his lavish Maldives vacation. With a smirk on his face, my father casually announced, "Your house paid for their fun." The shock hit me like a physical blow, but I only smiled in response. "What's so funny?" he snapped. "My name is Vivian Hale, a marketing director who has been self-sufficient since the age of 18. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Ashford Hills, I learned early that I would need to forge my own path. While my parents had the means to help with my education, they always prioritized my younger brother, Marcus. "He needs more support than you do," they'd say. "You're naturally gifted." Through high school I worked 3 jobs at once to save for college. Mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at a restaurant, weekends at a retail store. My parents praised my work ethic but never offered a dollar. Marcus, meanwhile, got a brand new car for his 16th birthday and an unlimited allowance he spent on video games and parties. Marcus, now 27, has never held a steady job. Every failed attempt at independence was met with rescue from our parents. Rent covered when he was fired for tardiness, credit card debt wiped clean, even a doomed podcast about luxury living funded and abandoned after 3 episodes. When his girlfriend of 6 months left him for his immaturity, our parents consoled him like he'd survived a tragedy. After graduating with honors, I took an entry-level marketing job with 0 student debt. Not from luck, but from 4 brutal years of maximum course loads. My father's comment on the achievement: "You were lucky to find those jobs. Not everyone has your advantages." For 5 years I lived frugally, saving for a down payment. Brown bag lunches, no social life, every dollar tracked. Eventually I found it. A 2-story craftsman on a quiet street lined with mature oaks, built in the 1950s, with wide plank floors, a brick fireplace, and a garden that reminded me of the one my late grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, used to tend. Grandma Eleanor had been my sanctuary growing up. I'd bike 3 miles to her house whenever the favoritism at home became unbearable, and she'd greet me with warm cookies and the words, "You are stronger than you know, Vivian. One day that strength will be your greatest asset." She'd passed 3 years before I found this house, but signing the closing papers, I felt her there. My family's reaction to the house was predictably dismissive. My mother critiqued the work it needed. My father questioned if I'd overpaid, and Marcus laughed at the kitchen. "Must be nice to be so lucky," he said, as if my sacrifice meant nothing. For 2 years I poured myself into that house, painting every room, restoring the floors, planting flowers Grandma Eleanor would have loved. Then came a career-defining opportunity, a 2-week trip to Tokyo to pitch our firm to international clients. The timing clashed with my rose bushes blooming, so I hired a gardening service. But my mother insisted on keeping a spare key too. "We'll check on the house while you're gone." Against my better judgment, I agreed. The night before I left, Marcus called, devastated over a breakup, begging for a healing trip to the Maldives. When I asked how he'd afford it, he sighed. "Mom and Dad say they can't help this time." A knot of unease settled in my stomach as I handed my mother the key. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll take good care of everything." I should have trusted that unease. 2 grueling weeks later, having landed 3 major contracts, I flew home exhausted, craving nothing but my own bed. The taxi pulled up to a dark porch. The light I'd set to trigger at sunset was off. My key didn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. The lock had been changed. Called my mother, voicemail. My father answered, oddly cheerful. "Vivian, you're back. How was the trip?" I told him my key didn't work. "You should come over. We need to talk." At my parents' house, Marcus lounged on the sofa scrolling vacation photos. My mother avoided my eyes in the kitchen, and my father watched basketball like nothing was wrong. "What's going on?" I demanded. "Why was my lock changed?" Marcus turned his phone toward me. "Beach shots, an infinity pool, a water bungalow. Maldives, baby. 5-star all the way. How did you afford this?" My father muted the TV. "We found another solution. We sold your house." My knees buckled. You sold my house. Without my permission. That's illegal. We had your key, he said, waving a hand. We had access to your paperwork. The rest was details. Details. You mean fraud. Marcus, utterly without remorse, gushed about the underwater restaurant and private butler. My mother offered feebly. Not all of it went to the vacation. We needed a new car too. And Marcus deserved something nice. So you committed fraud, sold my house, and used the money for a vacation, I said, forcing calm. My father's face hardened. Don't be dramatic. You can buy another house. We're your parents. We know what's best. Then, with a smirk, your house paid for their fun. Something in me went eerily still. Smiled, picked up my suitcase, and walked out. I drove through rain-soaked streets to my best friend Nora's apartment. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. Between sobs, I told her everything. That's not just immoral, Vivian, she said, furious. That's criminal. We need to call the police. There's something else, I said. Something about the house they don't know. I explained about my grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, the one person who had truly seen me. 3 years before I bought the house, she'd quietly set up a private trust with me as trustee and beneficiary, deliberately hidden from my father, who'd borrowed heavily from her in the past and never repaid a cent. The house isn't technically mine, I told Nora. I'm the trustee of Grandma's estate. She built in a clause. If any family member tries to misappropriate trust assets, they forfeit all inheritance rights immediately. Nora's eyes went wide. So by selling it, they violated the trust. And there's more. I installed hidden security cameras before I left. I have footage of them going through my papers, meeting a realtor, forging my signature. The next morning, fueled by Nora's pancakes and a plan, I called Eleanor's longtime attorney, Theodore Whitfield. Within hours we sat in his office. This sale is not valid, he confirmed. As trustee, only you can authorize the transfer of trust assets. Any sale without your legitimate signature is fraud. He explained the forfeiture clause. My parents and Marcus had, by their own actions, voided their future inheritance, which included not just the house, but $220,000 each, scheduled for my 35th birthday, plus use of a family cabin at Willow Creek. We tracked down the buyers, a young couple named the Bennetts who'd relocated for work and had no idea anything was amiss. We had no idea, Mrs. Bennett said, shaken. Mr. Whitfield assured them they'd be made whole. Then came the police report. Detective Coleman reviewed my security footage. My father and Marcus rifling through my office, my mother practicing my signature on a notepad before forging it onto the sale documents. This is pretty clear-cut fraud and forgery, she said. My cousin Derek called soon after, having heard second-hand panic from an uncle. Through him I learned the full extent. The house had sold for $385,000. Marcus's Maldives trip cost nearly $58,000. My parents bought a $52,000 SUV. The rest sat in a joint account, already being drained. Derek also revealed this wasn't the first attempt to raid Grandma Eleanor's money. An uncle had once pushed my father to contest her will, convinced there was more hidden away. Nora and I spent days compiling evidence. Financial records, trust documents, video, buyer statements. Mr. Whitfield prepared formal notices invoking the trust's forfeiture clause. We should deliver these in person, I decided. With witnesses. Neutral ground. We arranged a family dinner at a private room in a restaurant on the Cedar River, inviting my parents, Marcus, and extended family, Aunt Rosalind and Uncle Walter, Cousin Josephine and her husband Adrian, Uncle Frank and his wife Miriam. People who'd watched the favoritism for years and never intervened. My parents arrived confident, my mother nervously clutching a new designer bag. Through dinner, conversation stayed shallow, until dessert, when Mr. Whitfield and Detective Coleman walked in. Understood. I'd like to explain why I invited you all here. I described the fraudulent sale, then nodded to Nora, who projected the security footage. The room watched in silence as my father and Marcus rummaged through my office, as my mother practiced and forged my signature while my father coached her. "Make the V more looped." "Turn that off," my father demanded. "This is fraud, Dad," I said. "Not private business." I introduced Detective Coleman, then Mr. Whitfield, who explained the trust, that the house had never been mine to sell, and that by attempting to take it, my parents and Marcus had forfeited every future distribution, including the $220,000 each in the cabin. "You cannot do this," my father said, voice cracking. "She's my mother. That money should have come to me." "Your mother disagreed," Whitfield replied. "And she had her reasons, which tonight has validated." My mother turned on my father. "You said this would be simple. Now we've lost everything." Marcus turned on them both. "This is your fault." Watching them collapse on each other, I felt no triumph, only a quiet, aching sadness. "You cannot do this to your family," my father tried one last time. "We raised you. You owe us." "I owed you respect and I gave it," I said. "I owed you gratitude and I gave that too. But I never owed you my house, my future, or the right to commit crimes in my name." As Detective Coleman escorted them out, my Aunt Rosalind approached me quietly. "We all saw how they treated you growing up. We should have said something." One by one, relatives echoed the same regret. Too late to undo the past, but something finally. The weeks that followed brought a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The evidence was overwhelming. My father accepted a plea deal: 2 years probation, restitution, and 450 hours of community service. My mother received similar terms. Marcus, charged as an accessory, got a year's probation and was ordered to repay the full cost of his vacation. 4 months after Tokyo, I regained legal possession of my house. Walking through the door again, the space felt unchanged, but the emotional landscape had shifted permanently. The consequences were swift. My parents sold their own home to cover fees and restitution, downsizing to a small apartment. Marcus sold his clothes, electronics, and finally his car, eventually taking a minimum wage job at a car wash, ironically detailing vehicles like the one he'd once flaunted. 6 months later, my mother began texting apologies, then transparently asking about restoring their inheritance rights. My father's messages alternated between guilt trips and self-pity. Mr. Whitfield advised silence. "Their rights are irrevocably terminated. This is emotional manipulation to recover financial losses." Our extended family drifted from my parents and Marcus as the truth settled in. My father's consulting clients quietly left. Marcus's friends, who'd enjoyed his stolen generosity, disappeared along with the money. I began therapy with Dr. Melissa Ferris, who helped me name what I felt: complicated grief, mourning the family I deserved while processing the betrayal of the one I had. Nearly a year after the confrontation, I moved back into the house, repainting every room, replacing flooring, redesigning the garden with new plants untouched by the past. Nora helped me sage the house room by room, a ritual I was skeptical of, but that resonated all the same. Planting new rose bushes for Grandma Eleanor one afternoon, I understood something. The greatest theft my family attempted wasn't the house, it was my sense of worth. By fighting for justice instead of surrendering to their narrative, I reclaimed both. Nearly 2 years after the confrontation, my parents made one last attempt. They were considering moving near Marcus in Arizona, and my mother wrote, "We're still your parents. Family should forgive." I replied once, briefly. Forgiveness might be possible, but restoration of trust required transformed character over time, not words, and until then I would continue my life separately. No meaningful response ever came. My career flourished. The Tokyo contracts became lasting partnerships, and I was promoted to Senior Director of International Marketing within 6 months. I built a circle of real support: Nora, my closest confidant, my cousin Derek, whose loyalty never wavered, and new friends from a support group for people navigating family estrangement, with whom I built new holiday traditions. News of my parents and Marcus trickled in occasionally through Derek. They had indeed moved to Arizona, living in adjacent apartment complexes, still constrained by what they'd cost themselves. Sometimes I felt a twinge of sadness for what might have been. Those moments grew rarer as my life filled with people who valued me for who I was. The house became a gathering place for my chosen family. Monthly dinners, garden barbecues, harvest celebrations. In the old study, once violated by their intrusion, I founded the Eleanor Whitmore Scholarship, using the funds my parents and Marcus had forfeited to support 10 students a year who, like me, were building futures without family backing. Through the foundation I met Nathan Cole, a financial advisor who volunteered his time mentoring recipients. What began as professional respect grew into something deeper, a relationship built, for the first time, on honesty instead of hidden shame. "Your grandmother was a wise woman," he told me once. "She saw what was coming and made sure you'd be protected." As the second anniversary of that confrontation approached, I sat in my garden one summer evening and opened Grandma Eleanor's journal, discovered among her papers. An entry from 30 years earlier read, as if written for this exact moment, "Love should never require the diminishment of self. True family lifts you higher, sees your light, and helps it shine brighter. Those who would dim your light to make theirs seem more special are not acting from love, regardless of what they claim. Remember, you always have the right to step away from shadows and into sunshine." That was the lesson beneath everything. Family isn't defined by blood, but by consistent actions, respect, support, and care without conditions. I had learned to tell the difference between obligation and genuine connection, between manipulation dressed as love and care that expected nothing in return. The house that once held such betrayal had become a sanctuary again, not because the pain was erased, but because it had been folded into something larger, a story of growth, chosen family, and reclaimed worth. The strength they had always underestimated in me had become exactly what my grandmother predicted it would be: my greatest asset. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who crossed a line? I'd love to hear how you handled it.